Let's try again, guys. Good morning, everyone. I'm now broadcasting. Yes, it's true. Beaming. We're gonna go flying today. I feel like that's what we're about. Good morning, also, love streamers. It's the beginning of what can be a 4-day weekend. Holiday weekend in the United States, and we may or may not have such a huge crowd here, so it's fun to know that there's lots of other people out there that sometime along the line may actually join us in this gathering. This is the group for A Course in Miracles on Friday mornings at 10:30 in Amesbury, Massachusetts at Unity on the River, and we broadcast live stream, and it's recorded, so if there's anybody you want to share it with later, you can find it on teachersofgod.org website. You can also find there any of the upcoming events. There's a calendar. If you go to events in the header, you can find out what's going on and what's coming up.
YouTube channel. That's where they'll find the archives.
Oh, the archives of the programming will be at the YouTube channel.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I can tell I'm usually here, so I don't usually have to go look up the archives. All right. It looks like I'm also the speaker, so we can start. I knew that ahead of time. I'm not surprised, but what was new that I would get to be the greeter. So. I made a little bit of a crib sheet. I'm actually trying.
Are we going to do Namaste first?
Oh yes. Oh, and the okay. You can tell I don't usually do this. It's easier from out there. First, we do Namaste, and then we do the Plenty of Time book. All right. First, let's do the meet and greet for those of us that are here. Say hello. See the true Christ, the self in each person.
Namaste.
Namaste.
Behold the Christ in you.
I behold the Christ in you. I live it with you. Namaste. Good to have you.
Namaste. Welcome. Namaste.
Oh, namaste.
Namaste to you, Nancy to Nancy. Namaste, love streamers.
It looks like there's a lot of people.
Hi, Lynn.
Hi, namaste, Nancy. Oh, I'm so glad to hear you speaking. I didn't know who was going to be speaking today.
It's always a little mystery.
But your friend Kathy coming.
Yeah, it's fun to see her again.
That's a quick namaste.
It is a quick namaste this morning.
You want to drag it out a little bit?
Well, just I can see everybody.
Namaste, Nancy.
Namaste.
Looking forward to you teaching today.
Thank you.
Your
Thank
microphone's
you.
on. Too.
Awesome.
Namaste.
Namaste, Nancy. I know. So funny. I always think of you as a Mary. As a Mary.
It took me a while to find out in my address book because I kept looking for Mary. She's all right. She came up. I made her come a couple weeks ago. The last couple weeks
Okay.
ago.
Thank you.
Or last week.
All right, coming up next is our the Namaste conversation continues here for a second. Coming up next, we have Laura Powers, who is going to share the reading from the book called Plenty of Time, which is used at Cafe Gratitude in California as a way to ground and settle their staff before they do their report for work every shift.
Hi, everybody. Live streamers. I'm Laura. And today is awesome.
Pick up the mic.
Sorry. Here we go. There we go. Is it on?
You should see the green light.
Can you hear me?
Green light on?
You can hear me? Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Laura, and Cafe Gratitude. Today, August 30th, is Expectation Reduces the Joy in Life. And the question is, for everybody, what are you not saying? And I would say Expectation definitely reduces the joy in life because, especially being in AA, we know that expectations are premeditated resentments, and resentments are fatal. So, if I have an expectation, it's all of the ego. It's not of Source, God. And what am I not saying today? What I'm not saying is blame and shame onto other people because they're not meeting my expectations. So that's very important that I not say those things, because my MO was to fix and control my children, my husband at the time, people around me. And this Course of Miracles has taught me, if I look to a human outside of me, boyfriend, husband, child, I am sadly mistaken, because they can never, ever, ever set my soul free. That has to come from Source. So what am I saying today? What are you not saying is for me to not say the things I used to say, because it was taught to me at a young age, and I taught it to my children, unfortunately. So this is a whole new way of life. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Laura. That feeds really well into what we're going to be considering this morning. As usual, I don't ever know quite what I'm going to say until it's over, and I know what came out of my mouth. But I think I agreed almost 6 weeks ago to teach today. So the idea of, so what am I going to settle in on kept coming in and out. And ultimately, I decided to call it Claiming Christ Consciousness. First, I would acknowledge that in lots of different traditions and practices, the language for that can be different. And so I'm pointing to an awareness of knowing that I am joined with everyone, that I was created by the one and only Source, which I usually call God, that I am as that God, loving, eternal, expansive, forgiving. God doesn't even have to forgive. So I'm like that because that was my creator. That's where I came from. So claiming Christ consciousness for me is partly going to be a coming out for me. It's like, okay, I'm ready to acknowledge out loud that I'm in a little different place than I was before, and I'm becoming aware of it. I'm not necessarily completely comfortable with it yet, but I'm becoming aware of it. So the kind of things I want to talk about are first noticing, like, what am I seeing that sort of makes me say that? What am I feeling or noticing? And allowing my own quirky characteristics and influences, that some of my influences compared to what I think everybody else was influenced by seem quirky to me, and I've been embarrassed about them or not willing to say them out loud. It's kind of like when I worked as a research chemical engineer, I really hadn't started A Course in Miracles, and there was probably a reason for that. But even the people I still knew from work who were also in my church, I didn't say too much about that for a while because it felt way out of sync, out of expectation from the role that I had as a data collector, analyzer, logical thinker, which I did pretty well. But A Course in Miracles was like just flipping the whole switch to another kind of place. And then there's choosing, what am I choosing now? And trusting has to be part of it. I think sometimes we put down a formula for doing forgiveness or living A Course in Miracles, and we forget that one of the steps, which is at least implied but not always called out, like when we say, okay, first you pause, and you notice that I'm upset, and I want to put it on the altar, or I want to allow it to be seen, or just allow it to be there without me doing anything about it. And then you turn it over, and you can symbolically say putting it on the altar is turning it over. But in effect, I have to be willing and habitually willing, which is an ongoing process, to trust by saying, I know it gets better when I can do that. When I can notice that I'm irritated, angry, upset, sad, and I stop and say, oh, look at that. You know, and I sort of soar up here. That's our first taking flight today. I become my own observer in my own mind, and I notice what's going on with me. And then sometimes the noticing goes deeper, and then more comes out of it. And then ultimately, the conglomerate of all that is what could be called living Christ consciousness, or living with Source, or knowing who you are, being your true self in this life and in this world. First thing I want to go to is in lesson 189. In particular, I'll start at the beginning a little bit, at least to give the title, but in particular I'll be looking at paragraph 7. So this lesson out of 365 is not quite, is a little bit past halfway, and not quite to part 2. The whole first part of the course, it seems to me, mostly sort of takes us from the very beginning, assumes we're little toddlers and taking us by the hand and say, okay, you need to think this way and this way and this way and this way, and I'll tell you again very gently and in a different way over here in a different lesson and a little bit differently there. When you get about here, in part 2, which is about lesson 220, I think, it's assuming that we really have done this every day, and if you're not yet, or you haven't yet done that, I highly recommend that you do the lessons every day for the year, give or take. They say don't do more than one lesson a day, but when I was doing them, and I had to take more than one run at them, and I've probably been through them 2 or 3 times. If something was just a crazy, crazy day and I really could not settle myself down because of the demands of that day, I just let that day go by and proceeded as though the next lesson was was okay for the next day. That really does work on you as well as you doing the work. As a compulsive student, when I was first doing the lessons, I had to allow myself to just do the best I could for that day and keep going. Because if I look at this really literally, stop every hour and say, remind yourself, that didn't happen ever yet. But I was certain I would remember in the middle of the day sometimes. It may have been at 2:23 instead of on an hour, but and that mattered. It's like it's working me as well as me presenting myself and trusting and being willing. So here in lesson 189, the main message is, I feel the love of God within me now. So we started with mind. Nothing I think means anything. So we're talking about our thoughts. We're talking about our mind. Now we're touching base again with feelings, with our heart. And so we're connecting it more. We're acknowledging that it goes both ways. And I'm going to skip to paragraph 7 because even at this point, at the very end of the introduction to the lessons, it seems, here's paragraph 7. Simply do this. Be still and lay aside all thoughts of what you are and what God is, all concepts you have learned about the world, all images you hold about yourself. Empty your mind of everything it thinks is either true or false, good or bad. Empty your mind of every thought it judges worthy and all the ideas of which it is ashamed. Hold on to nothing. Do not bring with you one thought the past has taught. nor one belief you ever learned before from anything. Forget this world. Forget this course, and come with wholly empty hands unto your God. That endures for me. That's something we can touch base with at any time. And you remember that one of my themes is to point out that the command words in A Course in Miracles, the quote, doing words, are really pretty soft stuff, like be still, lay aside, empty your mind, hold on to nothing, do not bring with you, forget this world, forget this course, and come with wholly empty hands unto your God. So it's not a doing, it's a being, and we're being coached all the way through to get to that place. So then, let's see what I was going to share with you next. All right, I would like to share. There was another one in there, maybe not. I would like to share some of the things I am realizing have been influences to get me to this point in my life where I can absorb the message and acknowledge too that the message has come in lots of different forms along the way. So here are some of the influences. One I remember, let's see if I can find it there. It goes back to 2002, not too long after I started A Course in Miracles, 3 or 4 years before that. And I was invited to a business meeting where the business guys were had actively formed a council that they called Council on Realizing Excellence in Management. And their point was that humor, business, creativity, and emotions and integrity were all part of successful business. So, and because they were businessmen, he called this pamphlet the ROI, the Return on Investment of Enlightenment. So if you allow yourself to receive enlightenment and you're running a business, said there are certain benefits. And the ones he called out, which some reason stuck with me all this time, there's a note in one of my day planner dividers, and I found the brochure. ROI of enlightenment. 1, flawless spontaneity. You can just do it, right? You don't have to plan ahead. You don't know what's going to happen. You don't maybe even know who's going to be there or what's going to be said. 2, fearless clarity. In other words, you get a message, it's clear, and you get to the place where you don't worry about whether it's right or wrong or whatever. It's what you're being told. 3, overwhelming compassion. Like when you get to that place, when I've gotten, I wouldn't say I'm completely there, but I feel like I'm talking about it at least, huh? I have way more compassion for other people because I've also looked at my hurts and fears as a part of my forgiveness lessons and seen them and felt them and let them vaporize. So it means that I can have more compassion for the people around me. And then the 4th return on investment of enlightenment, liberation. Like, woohoo! We did it. We're here. Somehow or another, we're here. The other influences that I was able to put down kind of in a big string all at once was first of all, of course, A Course in Miracles. It wasn't the first thing I ran into, but it's been the longest, deepest, truest, most foundational teaching and reference and help that I've had. And then things like Abraham Hicks and Byron Katie and the Science and Spirit conference that I attended last summer, where there were 4 speakers, all of whom showed scientific data from really different approaches that documented how coherence of mind and heart allows you to move up the vibration ladder measurably. The organization HeartMath measures your heart pattern and your brain pattern, and you can see on a graph going by, like you can in a hospital when there's a graph of heartbeat, that it's smooth, it's regular, and the two, your heart and your mind and your heart, are synchronous. They call it coherent because they're all lined up and together. So those presenters were Joe Dispenza, he's also still rising. I'm getting his occasional email, and he's like taken the people he's working with now on concentrated 7 to 10 day experiences where it's kind of like they sort of say, okay, how high can we get? How well can we do this? And how much of a challenge am I willing to test out when that goes? Greg Braden also has a different kind of archaeological, ancient wisdom kind of guidance to collect data on the science that he pays attention to, which shows things like there was a deliberate intervention in our genetic structure that's otherwise not explained, not explainable by science, that happened about, I think it was 20,000 years ago. I'm not so good at those numbers if I haven't looked them up lately. And it's why it always seemed odd to me that we had 23 chromosomes. It seems like an odd number. And it turns out that long ago, there was a joining of 2 of the chromosomes into one, and it's bigger and fatter, and that's why there's only 23. And it's said, depending on who knows why exactly, but for instance, another one of my influences, Cryon, and Lee Carroll is the channeler for Cryon, that entity, just like Esther Hicks is the channel for Abraham. And so Cryon says that humanity was seeded on the island of Lemuria, meaning extraterrestrial intervention happened and people from another dimension came and lived here long enough until everybody on that island had all of these chromosomes, and that was what then got it so everybody else could also get to that place. Bruce Lipton says things like, you're the commander of your genetics. It's really not genetics, it's DNA that's the influencer. And you can say to your DNA, okay, I'm expecting you to take care of this physical vehicle so I can be completely in service. You got 6 weeks. Fix everything you can fix in that amount of time, and keep saying it. So he's the scientist, right? So it's like folks that started out in science are now embracing other dimensions, other places. I was introduced to Amma because of Monica Dubé, so I'm not sure she was a huge influence, but just knowing she is and having been at several of her gatherings means that I'm just in awe of how many different versions and forms and looks and what seems to be different messages, but really convergence of all the messages in one place. I also heard, again, Oprah interviewing Gary Zukav way after the beginning. And I remember when I was with my mom in Florida, sitting on the couch and sort of hearing her interview Gary Zukav, Seed of the Soul author. And that made a pivotal change for her, so that she wasn't going to do any programming after that point unless it rang true with her heart. It had to have something bigger, more deep, more feeling in it so she told her producers, that's the thing. You can bring it to me and you need to have that, and then I need to agree with you before we choose that and put it on. I was also, and still am, I'm not quite finished rereading and you've heard me mention this before, the book called Anna, Grandmother of Jesus, which is channeled and has fascinating specifics about what it was like during the life of Jesus as his grandmother. She saw Yeshua, he's called in that book, and his wife, according to that account, Mary Magdalene, become what she calls a twin flame couple, and the two of them together use their energy jointly, the masculine and the feminine, to get through that time and then to continue the work after Yeshua's was no longer here physically. So again, as a scientist, so I started out thinking I would be a math major and switched to a chemistry major, and that's what I graduated with. And then I taught in the inner city schools, and I taught 7th grade science and 9th grade science and chemistry. And then I went back to engineering school and got a master's. They gave me a leave of absence, so if it wasn't going to work, I had an out. I could say, okay, I'm going back. And I got a master's in chemical engineering, and I was hired by a corporate 500 company for the Aluminum Company of America. I worked for 20 years as a researcher, had titles like scientist, senior scientist, staff scientist. Never really got much higher than that, and I ultimately volunteered to be laid off. They were kind of gradually picking away at the workforce, and at one point I got to the place where I said, okay, I'm willing to go. My boss was so relieved. He must have been under pressure right then to choose somebody. They gave me an extra 2 or 3 months to work with a supervisor in another place to finish up the projects and be done. And I just sort of stepped off the ledge, like, okay, I think I have enough money to be fine, or I can always work part-time if I need to. And it wasn't that it ever got boring. It was just that I was finished with it. You know, I was done with it. So that science mind is now embracing channelers because it feels true, because they land, because they are what they are. And so for me, so here's some of the things I jotted down that seem to have changed with me here now. First, I noticed that there's more and more references to quantum, extraterrestrial, angels, and they're actually in A Course in Miracles. If you start reading it with that eye, you see references to angels and to other kinds of things. And so it's like when I learned quantum, in particular as a high school chemistry teacher, it was quantum levels for the electrons circling a nucleus. And so there was the one that was closest to the nucleus that was the lowest energy, and the electrons that circled there liked it there. They stayed in a particular pattern and mostly spherical around the nucleus. Really, the nucleus is pretty big, and the distance is huge, way beyond what I could even scale in this room. And quantum level jump, a quantum jump for chemistry was to go from the first to the second or third or fourth or fifth sphere out from the nucleus. And it wasn't a gradual thing. It wasn't you could be at 1.5 or 2 3/4. The electrons were either in the first sphere or the second or the third. And so they called that phenomena a quantum leap, and it was because it needed a minimum amount of energy to get it from that level to the next. They're all very specifically measurable amounts of energy, and so it leaped up. And hi, Michael. And so quantum to me meant a very defined kind of a package. Now I think it's being used with Cryon and some other sources. It seems to mean our consciousness is making some of those leaps. And just like electrons, sometimes you can go from the first level to the second and to the third, and then something happens, some other thing or molecule or event comes along and zaps off some of your energy, and the electron has to fall back down because it just reacted with something else that came up to it. So to me now, quantum means anything that refers to what my old self would have called otherworldly, out of this universe, off this earth, out of this universe, and in a different place. So, and then I've already indicated that another thing is that I'm trusting a variety of channeled information. And I've had at least one experience where it seemed to be channeled information and it didn't work out to hold its attraction for me. In fact, that was one that I kept thinking, what has got me here anyway? And finally, I bowed out from it. I'm also aware of knowing, of all of a sudden having something almost settle on me like whole cloth, like the satellite from outer space, sort of beep, 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 and it's like all of a sudden it's like I know. So one example of that was, most of you know I looked for something like 9 months for the place to live next, and I was going to buy it, and it was going to be a duplex, and I was going to have people I knew near me and liked. And 9 months into it, Irene Tompkinson turned around in this room and looked at me and said, well, how's your search going? And I just sort of went, And she almost whispered, and she said, David and I have a place for rent. And so that's the place that some of you celebrated with me a couple weekends ago for the open house. And but I knew as soon as I let that information in, first I had to get over my expectation as poison that I was going to buy it, and I had to buy it, and that I could afford to buy it. I mean, they qualified me for a number that just made my quantitative self go bananas, and I had to pretend it was Monopoly money even when I was looking around. It's like, oh well, I have a pink one and a green one and a blue one, I guess I can do this. It didn't have to be real at that point, but it turns out that ultimately I knew as soon as I said the next morning, I called and said, I would like to come look at that unit, please. And I get back, come now. Well, I'm still in my pajamas, but I can be there in an hour and a half. And when I get there, I get the grand tour, and I just, I saw that I got the side of the house that faces the lawn, the big wide lawn. My kitchen window looks out on that gorgeous green space. There's a pond in the back of the house. I'd thrown in, it would be nice to have a front porch. It has a little front porch covered. All those things that multi-list just chokes on. Nice neighbors. Therese just happens to be my nice neighbor. And in fact, another sign of the knowing, and it's almost like I know, and then I collect data afterwards that helps explain why I know, or just so I have something to say, because otherwise it's just like, that's what I'm going to do, and that's sort of boring. But Therese and I had actually talked way back at the beginning of my search, and I'd said, I think we could be roommates, or we could share one unit next to it. A week or 10 days before I said yes to that place, she had agreed that she would rent a room and a suite from David and Irene in the same location. And so we are neighbors. And this weekend, we're completing the residences on that campus, all 4 units, to be somebody also who is familiar with this site and this place. I won't say at this time who that is, but it's like, okay, we've got it. Everybody on that site knows A Course in Miracles, is doing some version of it, is actively living it, is growing and stretching. And so
God figures it out.
Yes.
He can, right?
God figures it out, because we really couldn't even imagine that it could be that good, right? Let alone orchestrate the timing and make it all work out so it would happen. So that again points to trusting. And what I keep saying is that when you even take a baby step in this direction, whether it's forgiving or trusting for a big request or whatever it is, the results are so amazing that they're self-reinforcing. In other words, they say, keep going. Look, this is what you got. Why wouldn't you do this method again? Try it again, bigger, more comprehensive, more trust. Keep going. All right, what was the next one here? Acknowledging, for me, these are the characteristics that feel to me like I'm in a different place, which I'm claiming as Christ consciousness. I'm acknowledging that I have a buoyancy and a lightness of being. I just feel like I can float instead of have to actually move my feet to get from one place to another. And I'm allowing forgiveness, and that's a little different than practicing forgiveness, because it's more like I recognize it when it finds me. I don't have to say, oh, this is bugging me. I might, while I'm doing the dishes, have a thought of an incident with family 10 years ago and think, oh, my brother was afraid. He was doing the best that he could. I intervened in that situation in a way he never would have expected. God was doing that too. And he was afraid, and I was afraid of him. So and then it was like that compassion again, that overwhelming compassion for all of us. We were all doing the best we could, and the fact that it looks disrupted now, it's just what it looks like right now. That's all. And then there's a term somewhere in the course, I didn't look up the reference, but using celestial speed up. That points to the quantum, otherworldly kind of thing, and the idea that it's all going faster now. And A Course in Miracles was part, it seems to me, 50 years ago, of seeding that speed up. Okay, here we're ready. We'll get this out. We'll find two psychology professors who are in a department that fights and spits at each other and doesn't like going to work, and we'll get them to agree that they'll together take notes. This is A Course in Miracles. Please take notes. Well, science people, got that kind of a message. Helen was terrified, so she called her friend and her boss, Bill Thetford, and she was telling him, I just heard a voice. And he says, well, take notes and come in early before work in the morning, and we'll look at it together. And if we think it looks genuine or worthwhile to keep going, I'll type it for you, and you bring me your note hand, which is now, one of the pages is copied in the front of this purple edition, the complete edition of the Course in Miracles that includes a copy of her note hand. I forget where I was going with that. Oh, the celestial speed up. So the Course now has a whole new edition, 50 years later, almost within that anniversary time. It's got this one that has everything, all the details, all the gory details. The people who originally took it are past, so it doesn't feel so personal to include stories about them, and they're not here to object. So now we've got like the encyclopedia of A Course in Miracles. Pretty much everything all in one place, all in one book. And it seems to me that the people who are just beginning this now are going to get to go through this whole change and awareness growing much more rapidly than I did, because of the time I started it, because of the grounding I had when I was little, and the people the young people especially who can hear it early are going to they're going to already know lots of it. They may or may not even need it. It would be a confirmation as much as a teaching to them. So there's a celestial speed up, and I feel it for me. It just feels to me like the kind of changes I've made in the 5 years since I moved here to be part of A Course in Miracles community have just been the biggest chunk of growth I have ever had in my whole lifetime. It's just immense. And it didn't seem like it was so fast at the time, but looking back, whole lot of things have happened in 5 years. And the other reinforcement is that I can see it in people who are still in this group who were there early on with me. Shirley and Lynn, and Laurel's been here for a while, Michael. And some people have other influences for things like AA and the tradition that also grounded them and prepared them to be well-tilled ground for the message in a course. So different people get their different ways, and because each of us bring our own personality characteristics, it's like it's really super unique, and it's all the same. You know, it's like we're really doing all the same thing, but we each find a pathway through it all. And then the last thing that I notice is that and I mentioned this briefly before, that there's a convergence of the same message in different voices. Some of them we hear here on Friday morning. Some of them are all those influences that I've been drawn to and notice, and there's more. I didn't hardly get an exhaustive list. So the influences are broad and wide. Now there's... which one of these do I want to do first? A couple readings I want to make from two of these things that have influenced me. One is Anna, grandmother of Jesus. I actually saw this in a little bookstore around the corner from where I live now the other day, and I thought, they have a copy of Anna. You know, it's like, oh, wow. And the other one is A Course of Love, which... it seems to me is in the voice of Jesus. It references the Course in explicit phrases and preparation kind of things. So I'm going to do that kind of as a closing before we can open up to some discussion. And here, I need to know what page I did. I was finishing this like as I walked out the door this morning. So compared to my previously compulsive, organized self, I'm not quite the same. Okay, 63. Yeah. It's like, it's part of what's changed, right? It's like, I still have to sometimes consciously say, you don't have to do it that way anymore. You know, it's like, it's okay. It's okay. It'll work. All right, the context of this is, it too was channeled to a woman who calls herself Claire Heartsong. And it's in the voice of Anna, who was the mother of Jesus. She did, in fact, live 600 years, according to this account and according to the biblical references. It was possible, but there were very explicit rituals of body maintenance and community support in the Essene community, which was actually spread out geographically across the Mediterranean Sea. They talk about being near Mount Carmel and Qumran, and then going across the sea to England and Wales, and that Jesus made those kind of trips as part of his preparation when as young as 8 years old or 12 years old. He started very young, and there was something about the community knowing that before the birth, you know, the story in the Bible is recounted here, and you hear it from her point of description, you know, that the shepherd who was there with the lamb and when Jesus was born, he kept in touch with Jesus according to this, and so every once in a while they could actually be together and visit. So when they were both young adults, that shepherd was still touching base with Yeshua. So anyway, this is her 600-year story. She goes through at least 3 husbands and 3 families. The children and the lineage and who's who is in a reference chart in the back because it's kind of confusing. But this is because I said it would be Christ consciousness, I pulled out a few things from here that I'd marked up that refer to our identifying with Christ as the expanded, ascended, resurrected and ascended Yeshua. So Christ is the spirit that joined the whole of all of us as one. And as we can connect with that spirit as well, we too tap into reality, basically, the truth, all of us connected as one. So this is in the toward the beginning, and this is as she talked about the preparation, which for the birth of Jesus. And instead of, quote, the virgin birth, it's called in here the light conception. And it's fairly explicitly described as the kind of an energetic kind of thing, an agreement between a man and a woman, but it's not what we would understand as sexual encounter. And yet that man, like Joseph, stayed with Mary, and they had children by normal means after that. So this is the idea that when the chapter is called Anna's Light Conception Initiation. So it says, whether a man or a woman, you are presently preparing the womb of your heart to immaculately conceive and birth the Christ, your indwelling Messiah. I hope to encourage you to understand and embark with me into the mysteries of light conception, which are relevant in your life and coming destiny. I reassure you that you have chosen to be on Mother Earth at this pivotal time so that you can consciously assist every cell of your body. There's the both physiology and the light conception in the same paragraph. And every atom of matter to receive the very high frequencies of light entering the Earth's atmosphere, a kind of spiritual insemination. So, man or woman, we are preparing ourselves to receive this light, this energy, this mission, this reporting for duty kind of a thing. Pretty mind-blowing, huh? 2:23. If you're still here in this group, still paying attention, even though you may think that's not the case, here you are. Here you are. And this is in a chapter well past half. That's as Yeshua was doing his healing work and going among crowds and traveling. And it's called The Power of Yeshua's Healing. And the description that Anna gives of the way in which Jesus healed is fascinating to me. He began by holding each outpictured soul in its perfected wholeness, no matter how deformed or diseased the body appeared to be. Next, he aligned himself with the overlighting angels of manifestation and tuned into the intelligence of the soul manifesting through the various axiotonal grids of the physical and subtle bodies. After merging with the soul's latticed matrices and assessing the soul's blueprint for this incarnation, he then inwardly struck a resonant series of inward tones, sometimes heard by the physical ears. These vibrations reverberated through the congested organs, tissues, and bones with all terror, grief, and rage, until all terror, grief, and rage were embraced and transmuted. Gradually, he lifted those discordant and incoherent fear-based energies into love's coherent expression of harmony. And this is a reference to the Christ light, and this is in the chapter, The Storm Gathers. So it was as Jesus began to know that it was about time for him to be betrayed and go through the crucifixion. I don't know how much of it, I don't remember whether he actually knew that's the pattern, but he knew it was time, it was coming. And so did all of the disciples. And by the way, it says in here that there was an equal number of women and men disciples, that it started out as 24, and by the time it got to this place in the story, there were 144, equally divided between men and women, often people who had agreed to be partnered to do just that work. Not only, because Mary was one of them, or I mean Anna, Mary was too, but Anna was one of the disciples, and at that time, her most recent husband had passed on. So this is about the storm gathers and the reference to light. It was a terrible time and truly a most wondrous time. We who had been through arduous initiations knew that everything we had experienced in all our lives, past, present, and future, was being gathered to this one pivotal point of choice. Would we remain true to the Christ light within us? Therefore, we sought to be as still as possible in order to receive answers to the most profound questions that moved upon our deepest soul. We gathered up our accumulated wisdom and bolstered our courage through constant communion with God. So clearly that's not all of it, but it gives you a sample. Oops, wrong book. Okay, good. 463. 463. Right. And this channeled book sat for a year after I bought it before I was ready to start into it. And when I started, I wanted to do it all by myself because I'm a slow reader and I soak up things deeply as I go. So I wanted to read as much as I wanted to read and then be able to stop and just let it sit with me and be with me for the day. And then I did it almost every morning, and I went all the way through it. And then I thought, well, it's like A Course in Miracles. There's still plenty here for me to absorb, pay attention to. So I actually started a group. And on Thursday evenings here, we've just resumed after a summer break, we're working with A Course of Love. What I want to read from here is in the part, this is actually a combined book, so there's the book, A Course of Love, there's a dialogues, and then there's treatises. So I'm in the dialogue section, I'm on page 463, and it's within the dialogues 12.11, that paragraph would get you in the place I'm going to be reading from. Oops, 12:12, I think is what I wanted to say. Okay. I will go back to 12:11 for that first sentence at least. Thinking is more descriptive of the ego mind. Thoughts are more descriptive of the true mind. So to me, thinking implies my initiation, control, doing, and thoughts are more like, ooh, that just landed. And then in 12:12, What and this is the same voice in the Course, in my opinion, what I am striving to help you see, once again, is that union isn't achieved with a flash of light from above, but that it quietly infiltrates the dot of the self in its unguarded moments. I am attempting to help you become aware and comfortable with the idea that, released of old patterns, the self will join with unity more and more frequently, until finally you will sustain Christ consciousness and live in a world as the elevated self of form. And then one more that's explicit. And then this is the end of that same chapter, the last paragraph, 12:19. The thoughts that come to you from unity can thus be seen as both your own thoughts and thoughts that arise from union. Union is not other than you, as I am not other than you. Union includes you, just as the, all caps, all of everything, the whole of wholeness, the one of oneness include you. We are in unity, one body. We are in Christ consciousness, one Christ. We are in wholeheartedness, one heart and one mind. Any comments, questions? Report of levitation?
Report of levity.
Levity, yeah. It doesn't feel, I mean, even though it sounds serious when you read it, it still feels like you want to jump up and down to talk about it instead of study it. Yeah, here we go. You know how to do this.
Well, first of all, that was awesome teaching. Thank you so much. I got a lot out of that. That was really good. And then the last things you read there about it isn't like a zap of light, that union. It is the slower come together. And again, like everything you said, no matter what modality we use, it all leads to the same thing. For me in AA, I had to do a thorough 4-step, look at my resentments, turn them around on myself, clear it out so the channel could be open for that light to come through, because it was so blocked off. And then once that started to happen, my friend, my sponsor, introduced me to the Course in Miracles, Bonnie, who had been doing it with Vicky for so long. And she brought me here twice and then left me here and didn't come
Here you
again.
still are.
And here I am. And I took right to it, where before, when she was doing these meetings with Vicky years before, she wouldn't let me do it because she knew I wasn't ready, because I was blocked off till I did a thorough 4th. And then that led me, like you said, to other channels. Abraham, I took right off with that after Lisa had posted an Abraham after one of her 40-day videos. And I remembered, I had that book. I read it. Asking It Is Given. And all of a sudden it just was, and it made no sense to me when I read it like 10 years ago. And all of a sudden it was like, click, click, click. This is the truth. A knowing, like you said. And Eckhart Tolle I had done probably 10 years before as well. And he had an Oprah thing for 12 weeks. I didn't get it. And here it was, right? The power of now. I hear it again, and it's like click, click, click. It's a knowing. It just fits in. So it was all a awakening for me. And honestly, and I was saying this the other day to someone, I had to have a marriage completely end after 20 years, and it had to be taken away from me so I would see that I made a human my idol. I had to get to a point where my God, my guides knew she's not awakening with these people that she keeps grabbing as her hostages, children, husbands. She's just not doing it. And I knew not to go near anybody for a year after that. And I should have waited 2, but it was really, because then I grabbed another hostage, right? And I try to fix and control him because that was my MO, what I read about earlier. That was my expectation. I will make you the person I need you to be. Just listen. And they never listen. So today, it comes from my God. That light comes from my God. And I can be with someone if I want to or not want to. And I make it clear to whomever I'm with, I'm going to be happy with or without you. And if you can't honestly look at someone and say that, you're screwed. And I know this to be true because even if it's my children, I'm going to be happy with or without you. I'd like you in my life, but this is a knowing. It's now become a knowing where, like you said, we come in here. The past 4 or 5 years have been amazingly growth for me and connected me just like you. So that was so good. Thank you.
You're welcome. And 2012 is called out as the pivot point. You know, we actually made it as a earthly population through the astrological change of the sun around the moon around the, I don't know, one of those things. And so the last 5 years have been within only 7 years of that earthly shift, when everybody is speeding up or can be speeding up if they choose it. Or they may actually be feeling more pain. There's more people checking out now too, you know, the drug addictions and the pain. If people can't have whatever, can't make the choices, can't see the options, they just maybe can't keep going in the body they're in and the personality they're in now. They'll probably get another chance. You know, go ahead, Peter.
It's just a comment really on my experience of the new Course in Miracles book. I've been aware more or less of the Course in Miracles for decades, actually, but never took much interest in it until a few years ago. It started to look interesting, but still, I didn't do anything with it. And now I've gotten a copy of the new book, and it seems to me that I wasn't meant to study it until that came out.
That could very well be, huh?
And
There wasn't time.
And it is now making sense to me, and I'm taking a very, very slow path through it. Like you, I read things slowly, and I
Math mind, I think.
retain
Math,
a lot.
engineering kind of mind. Thank you.
And I feel like it's just easily pointing out to me the errors that I've been making, and why I felt pain, suffering.
Yeah. So it's gentle, no? It's when I got to the place where I was ready to pay attention, even though I didn't understand big chunks of it early on. And my excuse was, the group I started with they were in chapter 23. No wonder I didn't understand. When I go back no, that didn't help either. But that was a good reason to say, it's okay if I don't understand, I can keep doing it, because every once in a while something just was like it was in neon lights and flashing at me. And then it's almost like, okay, that's all I can hold. And the next one was the one that almost put me to sleep.
Someone is asking if you can reread 12:12.
Yes, I can. Shall we do that at the very end to close with, or we're almost there, not quite. Let's just do it now. That's when it asks. 12:12. What I am striving to help you see, once again, is that union isn't achieved in a flash of light from above, but that it quietly infiltrates the dot of the self in its unguarded moments. I am attempting to help you to become aware and comfortable with the idea that, released of old patterns, the self will join with unity more and more frequently until finally you will sustain Christ consciousness and live in the world as the elevated self of form, self with a capital S. Beth?
Thank you so much. You've touched upon so many different points this morning, and all the different available downloads, all kind of bringing us to the same place, I believe, which you also touched upon, which was trust. Ultimately, trust my God, in a sense.
Yeah,
and,
understanding.
All the things that I've done through the years, a big part that I did was forgiveness. I did a really, several years of really work. I worked on forgiveness every single day with a ritual that I did. And all these pieces have brought me, it feels like almost like a quantum leap, like you said, these last couple of years. And there was something subtle that actually happened this morning. And you talk about those behavior patterns and being in the awareness that comes around with those. I was frustrated this week, and I could feel that in my body, and I was sad. I was sad because I was frustrated. And this morning I was thinking about it. It's like, why was I sad? And it really hit me experientially in my body. It was because I wasn't trusting. And to me, it felt like a huge breakthrough. Just that little piece, because it's really being like that hawk and aware of even those subtle little emotions that are kind of like underlying there. And it's almost like they can be unconscious, and then I went upstairs and I sat down and I said, thank you. And this little giggle bubbled up. And I was just so it's like I got this thought that came down, let's go play, let's go have fun, and it was and I was like, okay. And it's just it was just such a wonderful feeling it was it wasn't thinking, it was the thought that came through, like you said. It was the thought that came through. So it was really great to hear that, that differentiation. So thank you so much. It was really, this was incredible teaching today. And I want to thank you.
Thank you. My pleasure. It was a stretch for me to be who I feel like I am now, and pushing against what Nancy's old rules would have been. Yeah. Shirley?
Thank you so much, Nancy. Thank you so much. It was really such a pleasure, and you brought me right back to knowing you from 5 years ago and where you are now. And in our community, when we see other people growing and you watch them, it's like I know it's a mirror. I can see myself. So when I see you, Nancy, with that buoyancy and that freedom, just to be a free spirit and just be yourself, it's like, that's who I am. And,
yes, indeed.
And I'm more spontaneous, and I'm like a little kid a lot of the time. And you were just saying that too. And so, that's why I keep coming to the Course in Miracles and going, I'm a 12-step person. I've gone, I've been in AA for many, many years, and Al-Anon, and I've gone to different avenues. Like I listen to Eckhart Tolle. I come here and listen to Lisa and Bill. They're my favorite. I shouldn't say that, but they are.
But you're recognizing that a favorite is a good or a bad, and that's part of what we can at least notice, that we don't have to judge. It just is. You come to hear them.
So that's why I come here, and I have to say that I really enjoyed your teaching today, got so much out of it. And I love everybody in this room. You're all part of my community and my journey. So
Thank you,
thanks.
Shirley. All right, let me reread that one paragraph at the end of the second one that I read here, 12:19 from A Course of Love, page 465. The thoughts that come to you from unity can thus be seen as both your own thoughts and thoughts that arise from union. Union is not other than you, as I am not other than you. Union includes you, just as the all of everything, the whole of wholeness, the one of oneness include you. We are, in unity, one body. We are, in Christ consciousness, one Christ. We are, in wholeheartedness, one heart and one mind. So shall we circle up and close officially?
That was so good. Did
Awesome. Thank you. Ooh, warm my hands up for me. Got to get to close it up, gang.
Close it up. Bring her in.
There we go. We did it. Yay. Special appreciation for those of you who brought your physical presence here, so there was somebody for me to look at when I was talking. And it's out there, right? It's out. I mean, whatever it is, our love, our attention, our willingness is out there. So there is a donation box in the back of this room that says thank you on it and love for helping support the costs of live streaming and being in this space weekly, except for the fourth Friday, which will just be online now. And also online, there is a donate button if you would like to do so. So somebody want to start the blessing for the offerings? Love as me blesses and multiplies all that I am, all that I have, all that I give, and all that I receive. Thank you, God. Thank you, God, that we get to be here with each other, that you're always with us, and we feel the presence when we're all joined together in a bigger way. And we take the energy and share the energy so that when we leave, we're all fueled to be your missioner, to do all that's asked of us, to listen and trust and be happy, which is the purpose of A Course in Miracles. And so it is. Amen.
Amen.
Let's go play.
Thank you.